with me. And all right. So thanks everybody for coming out. I do have to start with an apology. The scheduled talk that we have today is going to be rescheduled for June 8th. But we will have, Leighton's going to step in and do some UX fundamentals, but we'll have a deeper UI UX conversation on the 8th as well. And the announcement for that will go out. We'll have Leighton start us off with UX fundamentals, and then I'm going to fill in some time with a few of the upcoming sessions that we have coming up, as well as maybe if we have time, a short presentation on just how some tips I have for preparing a presentation that may make it easier and less scary to present in the dev group. Some formulas that I thought that are pretty useful. So we will ready.
I think so.
So, go ahead. Yeah, she's confirmed. I'm going to talk about this in a minute, in a little while. First, we'll let Leighton do his presentation. There's a few more that are not on there currently. I'll put them on that we have coming up as well. Without further ado, I will turn it over to you, Leighton. You hit the.
Right. So good afternoon, I don't know if this mic thing is working. They can let us know. Okay, so I'll be talking today about
mute your mic. That way you don't get it.
Is it muted now?
Go ahead.
Okay. So, yeah, so today we're going to be talking a little bit about UX fundamentals and something completely unrelated to UX fundamentals. I found this website called Hacker Typer. So it's pretty much, okay, so it was interesting because every time you press a button, every time you press something on the key, it's just going like a crazy person. I thought that was pretty cool. So you look like a real hacker.
That's what they use in the movies.
Yeah. Look impressive, right? And anytime you want to look like you're doing work, you can definitely do that. Okay. So on to more important things. Okay. So UX fundamentals. So we're going to talk about the overview, understanding the user journeys and scenarios, wireframes, which involves tools, best practices, design, prototypes, core concepts, and tools, and then usability testing, which talks about the core concepts, how to, and a little bit of testing. So talk about the overview. So basically, if it was like an elevator pitch that I had to give you guys, I would say, okay, so yeah, if it was an elevator pitch, 30 seconds or less, I would say, okay, at the basic level, the UI is a series of screens, pages, and visual elements like buttons and icons that you use to interact with the device. And for the UX side, it is the internal experience that a person has as they interact with every aspect of a company's product and services. I thought that UX and UI were the same thing, but apparently not. So as much as I love a cartoon, it's not exactly as comprehensive, the explanation. So we're gonna dig a little bit more into UI for a little bit and then more into UX. So the difference between UI and UX. So a quote from Don Norman and Jacob Nielsen. It says, it's important to distinguish the total user experience from the user interface, even though the UI is obviously an extremely important part of the design. So what's happening here is even if the UI is perfect, the user experience, the user interface for finding a film if it's designed perfectly, the user experience will be poor for a user who actually wants information about a small independent film release and its underlying database only contains movies from major studios. Another good example that I found was Google. So the interface is really simple. There is nothing to it. It's just a logo and a search bar with a few buttons, and then you have a search result page. Everybody uses Google unless you're Googling on Bing, which I don't think that's a good idea.
Bingo.
Yeah, bingo. But the thing is, imagine if every time you searched for something on Google, it took you 15, 20 seconds to get a result. This design, even though it's pretty simple, the user experience would be a little bit different. Okay, so overview of the design is not just what it looks like, it's actually how it works. This is a quote from Steve Jobs, RIP. And UX is defined as designing great experience for users and tools that work great as opposed to looking great. So there's good UX and there is bad UX. So there are times when you go on a site and the site is easy to use. You go on there, even though the design is pretty bad. So I think of it as the DMV site or something like that, where the UI is not all the way great. But if you want to go on there and pay, I don't know, a traffic ticket, there's a ugly button that says pay ticket. You actually get stuff done there. So bad experience, you can kind of tell there's a difference between good and bad UI versus good and bad UX. The impacts of user experience, you're designing for yourself. You're thinking that user experience is the same thing as user interface, and you're creating your website or your application with a user-centered design. So this is usually what users see. They see the user interface. They say it's the iceberg model. So here they have the user interface, and this is what everybody sees, and they look at it like, okay, but there is actually some underlying stuff there that they don't really pay attention to. So there's the visual design, the user interface design, interaction design, information architecture, content strategy, user research, and business objective. So interaction design, that kind of deals with the structure and is concerned how the element responds to the user input. For the information architecture, that deals with the structure and is concerned with how elements respond to the user input. That's the interaction design. Interaction design deals with the structure and is concerned with how elements respond to user input. Information architecture, it ensures the structure and the navigation of the user experience allows the people to accomplish the task that you actually want to accomplish. Content strategy, that deals with the words, the pictures, and other information that makes up the user experience. It has to be current, relevant, and useful. And then you have user research. That's pretty much understanding the human behavior in their element. And it's a crucial part in designing a great experience. And then we have the business objective, which understanding the business objective and clarifying the problem to dispel assumptions early on is a good practice when you're designing an application.
Leighton, I think we got to switch from the webcam to your sharing your screen. Yeah.
That good?
Check.
Okay. So while we figure that out, let's take a look at how the UX.
Yeah.
Let's deal with how the UX interacts with the development cycle. So in planning stages, we design the right thing, not the thing right. So you're defining the problem, you're understanding the user's needs and goals. For analysis, we try to prioritize the features. We want to give them what they actually want and not provide something that nobody needs. And then we have the design, which is iterating the prototype based on feedback, and it's a low-cost way to make sure that the design is going in the right path and making sure that things are working as they should. And then for the implementation and maintenance phase, there is pretty much that comprises of user testing and analysis for user feedback. So over here, while I was looking around, I found these models, well, these two diagrams. So on the right, it's showing 6 different specializations for doctors. So you have a dermatologist, a gerontologist, a pediatrician, surgery, orthopedics, and gynecology. But in the middle, there's the general practitioner, that even though he's not a specialist in any of those things, he has a little bit of an idea of what's happening in each section that he can, just to make it work. And it's the same thing with user experience. With the visual design, with the iceberg model that I just showed you guys, the visual design, interaction, content strategy, user research, business objectives, and the information architecture are pretty much in a similar way that the general practitioner would work. That's how it looks for the user experience. Understanding your user. So do we have any questions or any comments or anything so far? Understanding your user. So now we're going to go over to the business requirements. So for the business requirements, we should understand that we should clarify the goals before we start designing. You'd be surprised at the decisions that get made that did not get made before the actual start of the design. We should have a couple questions that we should ask the users, the stakeholders. What are the goals of the project? How do we know when this project is successful? Who are the users? And why would they use this product or service, and what problem are they having? So the last two, I understand, are very important. Who are the users? You'd need to know who your demographic is, not your demographic. You want to know what your target audience is, and why you need to know why the product or the service is going to be helpful for them. I found in my experience that there's actually other ways that you can work around. Like, users would have a problem with, let's say, this button is not working. Well, not this button is not working. They would find a pain doing one thing, and they would like to have, let's say they would like to have X, but in reality, they would like to have Y, but they just don't know it yet. So asking the right questions, it gives a lot of clarity. So here we have a empathy map, which basically is showing how we would describe what the user thinks and feels. So we're concerned about what matters most to the user. We're thinking about what their worries and their preoccupations are. Think about what they want to achieve in the application. On the C section, on the side of sight, we're looking at the environment, the existing solutions, and the competitors. You need to know what's out there, what their alternatives are. Saying and do. Down there, we have the current task, the current solution, and the current behaviors. We should also consider, on the here side, what their friends are saying, what their bosses are saying, what their influencers are saying, and think about their pains and gains. Their pains are their fears and frustration and their obstacles, and their gains are what their wants, needs, and success measures are. So from my experience, I would go and observe a user, and that user, you could hear there are other users in the background. While this one user is doing something or going through the process, another user, you could hear them in the background saying, "Oh yeah, I don't like it when," or you have to pay attention to them in their element, in their environment. Okay, I'm just all over the place. So user is basically, the term user has a lot of different titles. So you have customer, viewer, audience, client, but we're just gonna talk about user for right now. Okay. So persona. persona and demographic, that's not necessarily a good thing for user experience. It's good for business and marketing, but not necessarily for the user design. So we should probably think more about why they want to use the product. We should think about the behavior and their environment. We should think about their goals, needs, and motivation. So everything can be summed up into the user is a blank who wants the blank. And from a plural site, I realized that they had a demo with a pizza pie app. So basically it's a pizza shop. Well, a customer wants to create a pizza app that allows the customer to choose the pizza from the menu. And then the app would send an email to the restaurant for the order. And then the customer would pay the delivery driver, and then the app would work. They would like the app to work on a PC, a phone, and a tablet. So on the right side here, where I have the questions that I talked about before, we would probably ask them, like, what are the goals of the project? Like, what do you actually want to achieve from creating this pizza app? And they would say something like they want to get more customers. But we would have to drill a little bit more. So, okay, everybody wants to get customers. Like, what is your target audience? And they would say, okay, we would like to target young people because they're on the app more often. They use their app more often. One thing that, I don't know if I have it here in my notes, but one thing that I heard was when you're designing phone apps, you're basically working for one thumb and one eye, because they're using one eye to look at your phone while they're walking, and they're using one thumb to scroll through your app. So you can't have it be too busy. So you have to consider the environment. You don't necessarily need a lot of people. You can use 3 to 5, 5 to 7. And then the observational research, you need to see how they actually create the order and see where their pain points are. Trying to figure out why they would use the product or service, what problems they're having while they're using the service. Those are the things that we would need to consider. Okay, user journey and scenarios. So here we're going to be talking about the big picture, the user journey, and the scenarios. So before we move a little further, we talked about the Pizza Pie app just now. So you're going to have the user experience. Again, like we said, it's not the same thing as the user interface. Good user experience, let the users accomplish a task. We're following the Pizza Pie briefing from above, and going from the briefing is not the best thing, because let's say they want the stakeholder or the customer says they want to, the customer says they want it to be fun. So if in my mind, let's say I'm making a phone app, I want it to be fun. So I want to, if I shake the app, a random topping shows up. Like, that's going to be cool, but is it really functional? So we need to drill down a little bit more. So while we ask these questions, it says, why do we use the product? When we get a little bit more definitive answers, it says to make life easier. What's the behavior and the environment that the user is in? It's a lazy Friday night. It's been a long day. Their goals and needs and motivation is to get me food. And the thing that we had said, the user is a blank who wants the blank. Says the user is a hungry person who wants to order with little effort. Sorry, there was a lot going on. So with the user goals, we have to think about before they actually place the order, during the ordering process, and what happens after. So before, it's going to be stuff like they're going to look up user reviews. They want to see what your application how it served users in the past. During, they want to see, they would like to have a specialty menu. They would like to see a nice variety of topping selections. And then after, they want to pay without searching for cash, and they don't want to have to worry about tipping the driver and stuff like that. So again, we're looking at the big picture. So everybody else, I guess customers, typically what they look at is the top layer, which is the visual design. But like Titanic, we have to consider the underlying part of the iceberg. So we would have the interaction. I think now we're going to be looking at the interaction design, the information architecture, and the content strategy. Okay, so again, our goal is to create a great experience and to take a step back in the big picture. Our goal is to create a great experience. So for the user journey, we're looking to map the actions and emotions for the user from start to finish. So we want to go from point A to point B, but there are steps that are in between. And for the steps in between, there's a journey map template that I found. That pretty much, you can use that to define the motivation for using the app, the problem that the app will solve, get the different phases, and then we can map out the user experience from start to finish, and we can catch the emotions and feelings, as you can see right down here. So what it would look like being filled out is the user goal in the first stage. This is for another application, but they would like to write a paper, and they would need to find the correct word. They would need to find, on the second stage, they would want to find the reverse dictionary functionality. On the third stage, they would like to get idea on how to use the word in a sentence. And on the fourth stage, they would like to complete the paper on time and get help every now and then. So here we would write out the details and the environment based on the stages. We would capture the user's thoughts. We would track their emotions, their emotional output. And then we could also see ideas and recommendations that come from the user. So here is a different way that we can approach it, which is scenarios. So scenarios pretty much are outlining specific areas of functionality. So we define the specific areas of functionality, we find what the system needs from the users for that scenario. We can also define what the users need from that system in the scenario. So in the scenario, we're going to map it out, which is sketching. Here you can see this is just one of the examples that I ran into, but you don't have to be an artist to do it. The user is the star, so they drew a star and put a circle over it, which was it matches my artwork. So I think this was something that for people that are afraid to actually do a hand drawing or a hand sketch. So for the flow, it shows the ideal path. It shows for flows, this is another way that you can use for the journeys. It shows the user, how the user moves through or flows through the system. It shows the ideal path. You can also show edge cases. So it's kind of like an algorithm thing where you would have the triangle. Does this person want to do that? Yes or no? And then you can branch out and go around. Storyboard, this is what we're looking at now. This is the comic book format illustration. You immediately understand what you communicate, and the user is a star, so you don't have to be a skilled drawer. And yeah, that's it. Let's see if I missed anything else. Okay. So wireframes. Wireframes for the review again, just to keep you guys in a little reminder, we're working on the pizza pie app. So the customer chooses the pizza from the menu. This is what we got from the briefing. Customer chooses the pizza from the menu. The app sends the email to the restaurant. The customer pays the delivery driver, and the app should work on PC, phone, and tablet. Okay, and then we have the responses from the questions that were asked before. So if you design without considering the people using your design, you probably won't get the best results. So there is a website that I found called Design the Web. Do that real quick. So really quickly, do you guys know what this website is?
That's Facebook.
Okay. Okay, that's right. You guys know what this design is?
Wikipedia.
You guys are on a roll. Okay. It might be a little bit more challenging. Okay. How about this one? LinkedIn? Want to try LinkedIn? Or? You know the people that are trying to find.
People don't recognize it.
Oh.
Probably like.
Okay.
No, the like number of pictures is throwing me
That's not LinkedIn.
Well, it's a hint that says the popular blogging platform is home to over 200 million unique blogs.
It's Tumblr.
Oh, yeah. No, it is Tumblr.
Is it Tumblr?
I think it's Tumblr. Oh, it is?
Oh, God.
Okay. You didn't know that.
Interest.
Oh, man. You guys have too much time.
Wait, am I spelling it wrong? Okay. Show them.
T-E-R.
T-E-R.
Bad association spoils useful habits.
Yeah, I hang out with Andre and things so bad. Okay. Good job. Something, okay.
I know this one. This is really
Something.com.
Something? Okay.
Amazon?
Dictionary.com.
You said dictionary?
Dictionary. Yeah, it's dictionary. What?
Oh,
Urban Dictionary.
Yeah.
You had me at foul mouth millennials.
Okay. What about this one? If you want to Stack Overflow, you want to try LinkedIn. I don't remember them. I just click give up and skip for all of them.
I think that's like,
LinkedIn?
yeah. And
You want to give up on this
I
one?
don't.
I have no clue. Or up in some.
This one.
Oh.
I
I went on there like 3 times. Yeah.
That's good. There's 9 out of 12. 7 out of 12. So what do you think about this one?
Give up.
Give up?
Flickr.
It's Flickr.
That's okay.
About this.
Give up.
Give up. Instagram.
Hold on. He knows.
Okay. Show and tell for designers.
Oh, I know that one. I know that one. I know that one. I know that one.
Is it who?
Vimeo.
No, it's not Vimeo. That's video. There's a
What was that?
there's a graphics.
Try and find.
It's I know the guy. The same guys from Stack Overflow.
Okay, we're gonna give up for right now.
Joel and software. Oh yeah, no, I don't know.
Oh, now.
No, I was wrong. I was wrong.
That's a lot of me's.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is number 11, second to last one. Stack?
Nah, that's not Stack Overflow. That's definitely not Stack Overflow. I know Stack Overflow.
Okay, so we're gonna give up on this one.
Yo. Oh.
Look at that. Okay, so this is the last one.
Google. Nope. Bing.
Up, down, left, right, BA. No, that's the Contra, but I don't know.
Yeah.
GameSpot.
Yeah.
That's like the game. Flappy Birds.
You're a master of UX, aren't you?
What was that one?
That's Flappy Birds.
No. Yeah, that's definitely
A little engine that could. So, no, you're rating from a computer. Designation.
Oh,
Never even heard of it.
Okay. So it's a visual. So for wireframe overview, let me get this out of the way so I can read.
Were they all wireframe? That was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Can I chime in for a
Go
second?
ahead.
I remember we were doing this before, and we would try to mock up something that looked like real life, and it got in the way of the point of this. Like all the wireframes, you could tell they were just like X's and lower instant everywhere. When you go in with a custom, you want to have it be the structure, but not close to the actual design, because then they'll get caught up on like colors and stupid stuff. Where it's like that doesn't matter for this. We're trying to get the information architecture and the flow down. But the closer it looks like real life, the more they'll pick at
Numbers and
numbers and like, oh, this is not quite our model, we've updated it or something like that. Like, don't put any of that stuff in there. Just put like logarithms and or very basic things. Like if it's really going to be a number like 1, 2, 3, then you can put that in there because that no one's going to argue with that. But everything else will just get in the way of actually getting the point done.
Okay, so from the game, you can show that that's an example of wireframes. So it's an interface without design focus. It's an interface without design, and the focus is on the function and not actually how it looks.
Jump the gun.
So pretty much what the wireframe is, it's a visual representation of an interface with visual design stripped away, so the focus is on the function and the user interactivity. I know I said that word wrong. Okay, so people usually focus on how it looks rather than how it works, and wireframe is like a blueprint for the app. Wireframes, that's considered as being the deliverable. The blueprint, you save that for the last part of your sketching, and then it's handed over to the team for development. Wireframing is sketching, which is what we just did on D-Design. Okay, so creativeblock.com, it has a lot of good wireframing tools. Couple of so InDesign, CC, that pretty much sets the navigation and you can repeat the navigation. So once you create that little block, you can always take it and put it somewhere else. OmniGraffle, that's for the Mac only, handles mostly drag and drop. Balsamic Mockups, it's a wireframing and it's deliberately hand-drawn to look like, deliberately made to look like a hand-drawn. And it's easy to use and it's the drag and drop as well. Visio, it's actually, if with the PC with Microsoft includes Visio, so it may already be installed on your machine. What's not recommended is the iPhone mockup. Pretty much it's you just doing a mockup for iPhone only, so you don't know what it's going to look when you try to scale it. Then the best recommendation is pen and paper, sketch often, and generate ideas. So wireframe is like a blueprint, and then prototype is like the arch model that helps to visualize the final structure. Okay, so best practices for wireframing. So the atomic design from Brad Frost. I stumbled on this one. So pretty much it's a methodology for creating the design system. So you have atoms, that's the basic building blocks for all matter. So it's like HTML tags. So you have like a label and an input and a button. So it's not very interesting separate, but once you put them together, you form molecules, which is a group of atoms that's bonded together, and it's the smallest fundamental unit of a compound. So let's think about it as a search site or a site molecule. So you would have like the little search button, we would have the label, search, then you would have the text box, and then you would have a button. That would be a molecule. So organisms, this is when molecules gives us, some building blocks to work with, and we can combine them to form organisms. And that's a group of molecules joined together to form a relatively complex or distinct section of an interface. So think headers, navigation, those are all different molecules combined together. Templates down there. Templates, it breaks the chemistry analogy and you get into a language that actually makes sense to the clients or the customer. It consists of groups of organisms stitched together, and the design starts to come together and you can see the app in action. Wireframing, the templates, this is where it mainly focuses. For pages, it's pretty much an instance of a template and you can add your photo and your content. And the most tangible is where this is where people spend most of their time, and this is what the review will be revolved around. So think about how it would respond on different machines is another thing that we would consider in wireframing. So when you have a tablet turned vertical versus horizontal, versus a phone versus a actual PC. Okay, so design. Design, we don't really think about it as a page or the template level. When designing, you shouldn't think about just don't think about it on a page level. We should think about it on a molecular level, and then we can build from there. So we think modularly, organism, and then we get the organisms with the molecules, and then we get the responsive container. The responsive container is pretty much the page itself. And then you can stick the organisms where they need to be. So prototypes. We're going to talk about the core concepts in prototypes and the tools. Sure.
So some tools that you use for your wireframes allow navigation. So like you said, they allow to show the user not only the snapshot, but also the functionality and how you navigate in the scenarios that you talked about before.
Yeah,
So
that's
you can use that to start the storyboard, the scenario, using the sequence of
Yeah, and that does.
Sonic pencil.
Yeah. That's a good point.
So what are some of the tools that you have experience?
Pencil, Balsamic. You mentioned.
Oh, I did. So I started looking into this, I think Wednesday. So I'm still at the baby stage.
Yeah. I was going to give him kudos at the end because he kind of, when we found out we had to reschedule, like, hey, I need help. He's like, okay, I'll jump in, and that's really helpful for this group to run, and that's to kind of keep our cadence. If people step in and things come up, we're at work, so sometimes people that we had scheduled have other things to do. So if we have people that are willing to fill in and backfill, or just kind of have a talk in the waiting, or if they just say, hey, within short notice, jumping in. Like I said, Leighton just started this like a day or two ago, and it looks pretty doggone good, actually.
Keep doing this. I didn't know I have so much content.
No.
I'm not going to do that. I wasn't going to do that.
Okay, so in prototypes, I think I'm not sure how far I am in this slide, but in prototypes, again, this is the review, just to keep you guys, just a reminder, we're doing the Pizza Pie app. We asked the questions, and now we're going to be talking about the core concepts of prototyping. So what are prototypes? So prototypes is pretty much the architectural model. There are different ways to look at the system. It helps the designer to test out different interactivities and flows, and it actually is a good way to communicate your intent to others. Why using prototypes? It brings your ideas to life, and you can get it. Well, it's difficult when talking as opposed to actually looking at something. It provides feedback within the proper context. It provides context feedback that helps to find interaction issues early, and you can quickly iterate to refine those ideas. Benefits of prototyping: it reduces the development time. So once you start developing, there's less changes that you have to make once you go into development. There are useful references for other teams, so you can augment and enhance your wireframes, and you can encourage collaboration. Collaboration is actually a result. It actually results in stronger solutions. So the types of prototypes. Here we have two to start off. We have the flows. It talks about how users move through the system, and the navigation and test. You navigate and test how the users would complete the task. And then you have interaction, where you test the interaction within their interface, how the page opens, would it open vertically or horizontally, and the micro animations. This is where you would be focusing in your interactions. So then there are three different types of fidelity. So there's low fidelity or lo-fi. Not sure why they didn't do hi-fi for high fidelity, but lo-fi is pretty much prototypes are quick and easy to make. So it's like paper, clickable sketches, wireframes. And then there's medium fidelity. So it's like an online prototype software. It allows for drag and drop interaction, often black and white. So the focus is on interactivity, not on the visuals. And then there's high fidelity, which adding how it looks and how it works. And it's a pixel perfect. It includes design elements, and it helps the users, customers, and stakeholders better visualize, the final product. So prototyping tools. There is a couple prototyping tools here. The ones that have the star, so that's After Effects and Experience Design. Those are actually Adobe applications. And then for the others, it is encouraged to download the demo version for any or all of them. to see what it looks like. But this, for the screenshot that I have, they're pretty much just a paper model. So they would have like a sticky note. They have the featured pizza. You know, you start out the layout like this. Okay, you have your label at the top. But then, you know, the user, after you put everything together, you figure that you would prefer to have the scrolling little thingy. I don't know. Have that at the top, and then, you know, replace these and put it down at the bottom, so you can have a better visual idea of what the website is going to be looking like. So that is for type. Okay. So usability testing. So here we're going to talk about the core concepts, how to, and testing. Okay. So for the core concept, we're going to talk about the good XP versus the bad experience. Well, that's supposed to be UX. So good user experience versus bad user experience. So this helps to understand the difference. People, not just, people, you see people struggle. Oh, so it's better for you to actually be there where they're in their environment, because you're saying UX is designing a great experience for users. So you would need to be there while they're actually going through the application, so you can see their pain points, you could see their struggles, and you could see what they actually appreciate in the application. And the usability testing, it ensures that the designs are user-centric. So make sure, don't be afraid to change your model and your design between each session, and then you can always change based on feedback with your results used to refine your design. Okay, so for how to. This is where you're going to check what do you want to test. You can test for flow, how the user completes a task. You can test for interaction, how they interact with the interface. You can think about the main task the users want to complete. So you should always try to use a script with at least 3 major scenarios. You can adjust the prototype based on the 3 scenarios. You make adjustments to ensure that the prototype can support the 3 major scenarios. And you can use, well, the question of paper or digital, the response that I've found is paper gets a quick feedback and it can propel to a better digital prototype. And both are good. What is it? Some feedback is better than no feedback. So you can recruit people. You never know, you can get a good mix. So try to get like a varying age ranges. Like I said, personas are not necessarily the best thing, but getting some age ranges, get a mix of men and women, get friends and family, people that are actually going to be using the application, and try not to be biased. And with the users that are coming to test your product, have them schedule. Well, the best practice is to have them scheduled, like, let's say you want a user come at 10:30 to 11, and then you have some time to write, you know, your findings, and then you have another one from 11:30 to 12, stuff like that. Lab project. Wait, is that the same slide? Change. Okay. So that is, so yeah, so lab project, here we go. So before testing, we should create 3 major scenarios. So for our pizza app, we're going to be, the scenarios is looking through the menu, adding the pizza to the shopping cart, and ordering, and writing a review. Then we're going to adjust the prototype to ensure that all those scenarios are satisfied and are supported. And then we, like I said, recruiting and scheduling the participant. And on the day of, we should print out that script, set up a recording device the faintest ink is better than the strongest memory. And then install the prototype on the device. I think that's it. Yeah. So any other questions, comments? You can send them to Andre.
Someone. Okay.
They say they were to book the
So persona is, so in the slide that I saw, but in the slide that I saw, it was, they're saying that it's good for marketing, like you're trying to target a certain audience, but if you're designing an application, you're trying not to design it specifically for a woman, or you're not trying to design an application specifically for people over 50 or stuff like that.
So the way I see this is you need to understand the personas, the multiple types of users, what are their goals, and from the technology, how do they use the application. So then you can decide, like, design the application for these personas or for which ones, and then start from there to,
When I saw the personas, I was questioning that as well. I was like, I don't know if, but because of the limited time I had, I just wrote it there. But I think that you are right. Like, I think that you should consider who your users are, but I don't know to what extent you should consider it if you're going to be creating the application.
I guess it is could be driven by marketing, and it's definitely a marketing tool. But my point was, I do believe that it's also a UX.
Okay. I know because I started doing some of the research in this because I was thinking to do the same talk. I know one of the things I found, I think you were talking about the problems with using persona. Is that where I stepped in?
Advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah. So depending on if your personas are too detailed, then you start focusing specifically on that person or that persona, and depending on how your group is made up, it can make you start to not think about other parts of your app. So I'll give you a good example of that. The Apple Watch, when they came out with it, they said it was the most comprehensive health tracking thing, but it did not track women's menstrual cycles, which is like half the population. You know what I mean? And you can imagine what their personas were when they were kind of putting that together, and what their team looked like. So they were like, what if I'm a guy and I'm running? And what if I'm a guy and I'm doing this? And what if I'm a guy and I'm doing that? And so because they focused so heavily on those personas that they had, they missed a whole half of the population.
We can look at it the other way. They didn't take the other personas into account.
Yeah, agree. Yeah. So that's the kind of the if you use personas, because I have it in one of my talks, you have to kind of be careful that you're not being biased. Yeah, that you're trying to make sure you're being as general as possible and not being overly specific. Because some of the ones I found, they were like, this person on a Friday and they have kids, and you're really if that's not your target audience, if that is your target audience, that's fine. But if your target audience is bigger than that, then that can start to eliminate like your usability for those other people that are not exactly that persona starts to really wane off. You know what I mean?
And also, maybe you should
finish?
The accessibility here, right? Because your audience might be people with different disabilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
You should take that into account as well.
Yeah.
If you want to, I mean, probably not for all applications, but.
Well, I think it's useful to know, because if you make it accessible for people that have different levels of capability, yeah, then it makes it better for the people that have it anyway. Because let's say one of the examples I found they use is that if you make it so that you don't have to use a mouse to work your application, then I may be able to use a mouse now, but what if I hurt my hand? You know, then I am now temporarily in that group, and now I can still use the application. So even if it's not your target audience, it's still kind of good to kind of incorporate that sort of thing into UX as well. So
at the same time, to remember that all
yeah, 508 compliance is fun. All right. Yeah. All right. Leighton, thanks for that. Appreciate it. Yeah. Definitely well done. Especially like I said, on short notice, that was pretty awesome. I want to just touch on a few things, and I need to figure out this room things. We keep having collisions with other groups. So just Leighton's talk was today. So that was this one, the UX fundamentals. So we'll move that over to complete it. Hopefully it'll work. Depending on if you guys want to stick around, I can give you guys a couple quick tips I have for preparing a presentation, how you can kind of, if you follow this formula, it kind of gets really easy. Once you do it once or twice, once you do it once, you realize how easy it is. It's like, it's nothing. It doesn't really take a huge amount of time. Like I said, within a day or so, you can actually probably do it, especially if you are slightly familiar with the topic already. On the 25th, which is our next session, Katie Baines is going to be talking about scaled agile. So if you have an agile team, what if you have a bunch of teams and they all have to kind of come together? How can you do agile scaled up for a larger team? So she's going to do that, and she's going to give us real life experience from the Estes group. After that, we're going to have Isabella, and she's going to be talking about the UI UX, the one we had scheduled originally for today. Yep.
I do apologize. I just got back a few days ago. I'm working on a dissertation. And then when I got here, I realized I just wanted to talk about whatever was important to you guys as developers. And I didn't know what kind of developers are here. I don't want to talk to you about stuff you already know. And I wanted to ask, what do you care about? Because I think a lot of us know basic UX, but when we start to implement it, that's when it becomes a problem. So I wanted to needle in on that.
Okay. So yeah, no problem. Like I said, this is volunteer stuff, right? Like no one's getting paid to do this. So, all right. Then also I have that. How many of you guys have heard that 20 years experience versus 1 year of experience 20 times? Because I think initially we had, I think Ben was going to come in and do an AR VR talk, and he got sick. So we ended up doing this as kind of a stand-in. And it's a topic I've been thinking about for a long time. And we can fall into that pit. So I'm still working on that. And the next time we have maybe a gap, then that'll be the fill-in for the presentation. It's a really good topic for people. And it's not developer specific. It's just, what if you get lulled into a sleep and you're doing the same thing over and over? Can you really count that as X amount of years of experience? Will someone else outside of your current job think that's X amount of years of experience? That sort of thing. So upcoming, we have a few things that are in the pipeline. So there's going to be a lessons learned from automated testing. I'll probably give that talk. There's going to be a Elasticsearch talk coming up as well as one from the Docker team. One of the Docker team members is going to come and give a presentation on Docker. Not sure exactly. We're still working out that, but those are some of the things that are coming up. Just to add a little bit, there is this website here too relates to the UI and UX sort of discussion, the science of great UI. It's really really, really, really good. As well as how many of you guys have heard of .NET, the .NET Rocks podcast? Yeah, just a few. Really good podcast, but in particular, there's a guy named Mark Miller. He has done lots of years of experience on UX and UI. He's designed a few things, and he breaks it down in a number of these podcasts. You can see kind of the progression as it goes through, and I'll put the can't do it justice, but if you listen to it, the stuff he says, it makes obvious sense once he said it, but it's not something you would have probably thought about before having an expert in that field point out these little things that, yeah, of course they're there, but we just don't pay attention to it. I think one of the best ones I heard in there, or ones I can remember, is how many of us has done this where you put a delete button and a save button right beside each other? That's everybody does. That's bad, right? Because now the cognitive load of, you have to be very precise or you're going to do something you don't want to do. You know what I mean? They should probably not be that close, right? Because they're not really associated with one another. They're totally different actions. They're opposites. And he points out a number of things. I think he breaks down the last podcast. There was I think 4 principles that they all have, or maybe it's 2. Maybe it's 2 principles and they have a scale, and you can kind of if you go this linear line within that scale, then you'll have the basics of a great design, which is pretty cool. They try to test them what if this comes back? And that's pretty awesome. Of course, I've forgotten most of it by now, but all right.
Well, I would like to say you are looking for what works. Yeah, I don't know what anyone else is interested in. Yeah, but I work in an environment that got one or two users. They won't, but I know I'm not going to have teams of people testing my user interface. So I personally am very interested in some of those sorts of things. Sort of baseline, what are good practices to do that make sense? Is this going to be a good UI? I know you're not going to make it perfect, but sort of baseline, what to start with that would be a good UI if you're not going to.
What about automated testing? The experience with especially like the native web UI testing. But if you have like a native app,
there's tools for that. I think it depends on you have varying levels of I can't think of the right word to say here. Like it helps you to varying levels. Like if your UI is relatively stable, then it's okay. If your UI is really in flux and it's changing a lot, you're gonna get a bunch of false positives on like problems. There are some newer ones where, let me take that back. There's two classes of it. There's like the visual design part of it, and then there's the functionality side of it. So the functionality side of it won't test whether or not it makes sense to the user. It'll just test whether or not you can actually do the things that your application is supposed to do. The visual side of it, like testing regressions on the visual, like the computer can get to the button, but the button is not on the screen displayed. You know what I mean? Those type of tests become flaky because every time you change a pixel, it's like, oh, there's a problem. So varying levels of thing. And then you have to look at your return on investment, like how much time is it worth? How much value is it worth to do that if you're babysitting the tests all the time? But that's just my limited opinion on that. Where is it? Okay. I'll do this one really quick. All right. So as I was trying to figure out, like, what should I actually present on? I start off with the UI UX thing, and I'm like, I'm not going to do that justice. Isabella's is like a poor substitution for what Isabella or what Leighton was going to do. So I was like, let me not do that. Then I started working on that 20 years of experience versus 1 year experience 20 times. But I didn't think we were going to have enough time to really dig into it. And I know some of you have heard the beginning parts of it. So to go back to the beginning would be repetitive for the ones that have heard it. And to start off at that breadth first versus depth first sort of thing without the context of the stuff that came before would kind of leave some people lost. I'm like, not a good one. So what I'm doing is saying, because to fill a gap, we also are always looking for speakers. We have a lot of people that can be speakers. They just don't necessarily think they could be speakers. So here's a formula that I use to put together the presentations, and it's worked for me in the past. This was supposed to like do the little thing, but it's not doing that. So pick a topic, right? It can be anything from the backlog. You guys saw the backlog a minute ago. There was probably like in total 50 or 60 topics in there. You pick any one of those topics. You can pick a topic that you're already familiar with. So here's the catch. Every time when you're familiar with something, you think it's basic because you already know it. That is not true. It's definitely not true. The things that you think are basic are going to be novel to maybe half the room, if not more, right? So pick a topic, whatever it is, and then, if you're familiar with it, that's okay. Here's another one too. A number of the presentations I've given are topics I know nothing about. So I just sign up and say, hey, I'm going to do a talk on TypeScript. Now it gives me a deadline and motivation to do it, right? And so I like learned a little bit about TypeScript. And again, not half the time, I think almost 80 or 90% of the time, you're going to be the only one in the room that really knows about that topic anyway. And the few times that I have given a talk that I didn't know about, and someone else was more knowledgeable about it, they just helped you correct things, but they didn't like call you out like, you're an idiot. Doesn't happen. Like I said, if it does happen, we'll handle that when it does happen, but it's never happened yet. So once you pick your topic, just volunteer. Like, hey, Andre, I want to give a presentation. I'm like, great, you're the best. When do you want to do it? which is the next one. Pick a date. Like we'll work together and pick a date that works out for you. And if something comes up and you can't make it, I'm not going to berate you or anything like that. No one's going to do that. We'll figure something out. So pick a topic, pick a date, then do the research. Like Leighton showed, he did a lot of research for that particular topic. There's a number of ways you can do the research. I tend to look at videos because I'm not a big reader. You know what I mean? But however you do your research, however it works for you, do some research. I personally like to create an outline. Like I just like dumping a bunch of things in a document and then create a nice outline that like kind of make the ideas flow from like in a kind of a storyline, that sort of thing. So create an outline optionally, brain dump the ideas on paper or somewhere, then organize those into a flow. All right, and then you can start preparing the presentation. Now, this is going to be specific to your individual style, right? Some people are slides people, you know what I mean? Some people like to get up there and just like write code live, you know what I mean? Like whatever feels comfortable for you, that's what you do. Like there's no, like you have to do this or you have to do that. One of our presentations that worked out one of the best early on was an IoT thing. I think Nick brought in his Raspberry Pi and he did some things. There was no slides, there was no live coding, but everyone loved it, So whatever your style is, do that. A couple of things to keep in mind when you're preparing your presentation, again, the obvious things, what will be covered, but then why would the group actually care about it, right? One of the things that we have people that are willing to present, but I don't want them to present because they're trying to sell us something, and I'm like, I don't want that to be what we're targeting this group at. So why would the actual people here care about that thing? If it's overly specific to your, like, here's how our application works, and they only just showing you the UI, and it's like, I don't personally care about that. I'm not learning anything from that. So why would the rest of the group care about it? It's like, here's why we put together this UI. That's more useful than the way we did it. Here's the technology stack that we're using. Here's the problems we ran into, and here's how we solved it. All those things people care more about than the actual end thing. How long do you want to present? So most of our presentations run the whole time. That is not a requirement. Like one of the sessions that we're going to have coming up is going to be all lightning talks, where it's like we're going to have, I can put that out there. We're going to have good food, right? There's not going to be pizza. There'll be like, salmon and wings and that sort of stuff. And like, it'll be real chill. And then we'll have a bunch of lightning talks where it's like, everyone gets up there for some small specified period of time, maybe like 5 or 10 minutes or something like that. And we'll just go through a bunch of talks. So that'll be a good opportunity if you want to like stick your foot in and say, how is this presentation thing? Then you'll be up there with a bunch of other people that are probably up there for the very first time as well. So details on that one will come out as soon as I figure out when we can get the food. That's probably the limiting factor. But yeah, I know Leighton's been there a few times. We've done that like maybe 3 or 4 times where we got like real nice food, like real nice spread. And we're like, we don't advertise it so people don't just come for the food. But it's a nice little surprise for the people that do show up. So it's going to happen, but you don't know when. So, all right. Add some Giphies just because, I don't know. Giphies make presentations awesome. Not a requirement, but something I like to do. Images and stuff like that to kind of break it up. Leave some time for Q&A as well. So let's say I'll ask you most times, like, how long, when you agree to do it, I'm like, how long do you want? And you'll say, hey, I want, 30 minutes. I'm like, okay, well, that's going to end up being a 45 or 50-minute talk because everyone's coming here, like they saw the topic and they showed up, or they just already one of our regular people, they're going to ask questions. So leave some time in your presentation for Q&A because I think that's the value added part of being here versus watching something on YouTube, right? You can actually ask a question and have that interaction back and forth, that sort of thing. Try to arrive early if you can. We are experimenting with audio. We're experimenting with video. Sometimes things don't work out the way we think they're going to work out. And if you come at 12, and that's what I mean by early, by 12 or a little after 12, because we don't normally start the presentation until 12:20. And that's by design so that we can have time to interact amongst ourselves. That's part of the purpose for the group. But also so we can work out any kinks with the audio and the video and the presentations. Like there's literally, that happens probably 40% of the time that something goes wrong. Especially when we change rooms, we have a larger group and we're in a different room. That tends to happen. All right, the last step, be awesome and have fun, right? If you've given a presentation before, right up until you give it, and right when you start, depending on your personality, you may be a little nervous. Once you get into it, it gets fun, all right? Especially after you've done it, and you're like, oh, this is awesome, I want to do it again. It's fun. A little tip from the 20 years or the other talk I was going to give, when you start giving presentations, especially starting at this like the dev group level, and then you start going up to like maybe other user groups and then to conferences and that sort of thing, it can skyrocket your career like really quickly. You know, I know people that started off doing development and 3 years later they're like the top of their field, not because they're the smartest or the best at that thing, but because they're the most visible at that thing, right? They got network going, that sort of thing. So this is a nice, safe place to kind of start that out, and then you can kind of propel it later on. I'll run into people and they're like, hey, Andre, and I'm like, I don't know you, and I'm, they're like, hey, I got this problem. Like, I got a call today and say, hey, we got this security problem. I'm like, I am not a security person. But people, they tend to come to you, and it's only because I've given a bunch of talks at this particular group and somewhat vocal in the community. You know what I mean? So it can be a really good thing for your individual careers to give presentations. Again, another tidbit from that talk, the 20 years versus 1 year of experience 20 times. A number of years ago, I prepared a presentation and I gave it to my manager. He's like, give it to me before you go in. And so gave it to him, got into the meeting, and realized he just took my name off of it and put his name on it. And he took all the credit for it, right? What did you do? Nothing? He's my boss, so I can't do anything. But I did learn from it, though. There's two type of, how do I say this? Because this might get too deep into the other presentation, but if you're okay with like just doing the work in the background and that's what you love doing, and that's fine, right? But you don't want people taking credit necessarily for the work that you do, because you're not capable of standing in front of the group and presenting your work, right? And that's a skill that's separate from coding, but I think nearly as important as coding, right? Because if you can't do that, then someone else is always going to do it. And whether they say it's you or not that did the work, it's what people see and hear. They see and hear the other person presenting it. So they attribute that stuff to their leadership or their talent, not necessarily the person that actually got the work done. So it's a good thing to kind of learn to be in front of an audience, to kind of feel that nervousness, but fight through it and be able to present to a group of people. It can, like I said, in short and ending, it can really boost your career. Even if you stay doing the same exact thing where you're doing, it can still elevate your career. So that's it for that. Again, thanks for everybody for coming out. If you haven't signed the sign-in sheet, then let me know. One other thing too, if you know other people that might be interested in the dev group, by all means, just invite them. It's an open forum. It's open to everybody here. Especially if you know people that are not web people. How many people here are web people? Like a web developer. Like you're coding for the web. And most of us are. And I've heard that response back from some of our non-web people, like, well, it's a web group. And like, it's a dev group. It just so happens that all of our people willing to present are web people. So it becomes a web group. But it's not that by design. So if we know of people that are doing systems programming or something like that, or hardware hacking, then please invite them and encourage them to present so that we can kind of get somewhat more of a balance to our group. There's things to be learned on all sides. All right. That's it. Thanks, everybody. If you want pizza, please take it, so I don't have to take